Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Economic growth is said to have witnessed some substantial development or recover strongly, as has been said, from the shocks of COVID-19. Inflation rate for the month of April has hit a record 23.6%. The country's debt stock has hit levels that some have argued that it could destabilize the economy. What can be done in these challenging times? Or maybe we are blowing things out of proportion. Well, on PM Express Business Edition, we're trying to get some solutions to these challenges. The country's challenging economic woes. What is the best way out of this challenge? As you engage a finance person, an economist, a corporate governance strategist, and someone who has poured out his brains to a lot of companies and also advising presidents all over the world and even in Ghana. He is an economist, Dr. Ishmael Yamson. And Doc, I'm so privileged to have you with me on PM Express Business Edition.
Thank you very much, George. I probably should say I'm privileged to be with you on the Express.
Yeah, and I hope it's not too late to wish you a belated 80th birthday, Doc.
Not at all. I'm still getting birthday greetings, so it's very much in place.
What keeps you going? I mean, the last time I realized that you were 80 years, I said, my God, this Doc is so strong. What keeps Doc running? I mean, you should see you at meetings and how you are passionate, and this is more than a top business executive who's like 40 years, so apt on issues, pressing on issues, keeping Doc running.
Well, I think the first thing I must say is to have a very supportive family. And I must say that my family is very supportive. But apart from that, I keep very much up to date with development events, economic, social, political, and all the rest of it. But if I should put it to one thing, I'll tell you I'm an avid golfer. I play golf every morning from Monday to Friday. And sometimes I have a problem with my wife because I wake up at 4:45 every day, and by 5 o'clock latest, my friend and I, Mr. Adolf Tego, we tee off. By 7:30 we are finished. And I think exercise is good, and I recommend it to executives. We all complain that we don't have time, but my experience over the last 60 years or so tells me that you may not have time for exercise, but you have time for your doctors, and your pocket will suffer. So, and since I took golf very seriously, especially after I retired from Unilever, I felt stronger, healthier. My last, and I do medical checkup every 6 months, very thorough one. And the last one I did, my doctor comment was that, well, we can take our time to review, there's nothing emergency. So that gave me a lot of confidence that I'm doing the right thing.
I mean, I have covered, I mean, way back in school, I followed some of the stuff you did, and coming onto this for nationalism, I have seen you at annual general meetings, and we had the perception when people get old, they even get off track when they're talking, but you've been so assertive, and not just even in annual meetings, but I've had an opportunity to experience you in some other meetings, and so assertive, and the issues are just on your hand.
Well, George, I think if you want your brain to die, it will die. I think the best thing, from my experience, is to make sure that you keep your brain very active all the time. I read lots and lots of magazines and documents, and when I'm running a company or when I chair a board, I make sure that I do it properly, and I won't take on any assignment that I can't do properly. Meaning, you need to find the time, you need to allocate time to understand the business, you must understand the dynamics and the ecosystem and the environment in which the business operates. That is the only way you are going to be able to be confident when you talk about the business and to represent the business. And also to help the business understand its own environment and what it can do and what it can't do. And to make sure, I must say that in the biggest company board that I serve on, MTN, you've got some great brains on the board. And yesterday, 2 days ago, you remember, one shareholder was talking about the mix. We have actually a balance of female and males. Yeah. And I can tell you that it's been an interesting experience. And I don't like people who come to board meetings and say, as the chairman says, as the chairman says. No. You're not doing anybody any great service. Say what you want to say and let the other members, all of us come together too. So I find the time, not only to understand the business, but also to understand the environment. And of course, you need also to build relationships when you run the business. So I don't feel old at all. I think I can go another 20 years or so.
It feels young at heart, some would say, Doc. Let's be coming back to issues of corporate governance in the country today, and also SOEs and advice for those budding young entrepreneurs and even chief executives. Will not forget your days at UAC and even Unilever and the wonders you did there. But I'll be coming back to you to help advise these young executives that are coming up. But we cannot forget about the economy. And one would say, and for you, having been there before, what do you make of what is happening right now? Some are saying that, listen, it's a global milieu, everybody is facing it. But you look at other countries, they've managed to deal with the situation well. What are we not doing right? Or first, get your thoughts on what is happening right now. Yes, some will say the fundamentals are strong, but growth, yes, of course, inflation, record levels, debt levels are hitting, and today we hear stuff about we are near default. We hear about investors. When you hear all these things, what does it hit you? Or?
You know, I think 3 months ago there was a Bloomberg article that described Ghana's economy as fragile. And I know that people who are in charge are unhappy with descriptions like that. But my own experience is if you want to solve a problem, you must understand what that problem is. And you must admit that you have a problem. The admission that you have a problem, to me, is 80% of the solution. Because if you admit that you have a problem, then you are more eager to look for solutions. But it doesn't seem to me that we accept the fact that we are in very difficult times. You know, I've lived in this country and I've seen every government since independence. We've gone through the ups and downs. What we are facing now brings my mind to where we were 83, 84, those years. So it's a very difficult situation we have, to the extent that we can't access Europe money. And don't forget, Euro money helped this country a lot to stabilize the macro environment and the fiscal environment. And the moment we lost it, we were exposed. So I think that the short answer to your question is that we must admit that we have a problem. And therefore, what problems do we have? We still have an economy which is the same as when I was a student of economics.
The structure hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed. And why? How many years after independence? We have had all the opportunity to restructure the economy. And one thing that shocked me recently, when I read that in 2021, Ghana produced 888,000 tons thereabouts of cocoa, and Côte d'Ivoire produced 2 million tons. And yet, just between the Kufuor administration and Atabris administration, we had crossed 1 million tons. So what happened? Why are we now going backwards? Even with the old economy, we are not doing that well. I think we have been saved because we have, to some extent, because global commodity prices have shot up.
Yeah.
Oil price, this morning, $230 per barrel of Brent crude oil. The other side of it, the flip side of it, we'll talk about later. But so that would tell you Ghana has, our trade balance is so improved dramatically.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just deceiving ourselves that our trade balance has improved.
So
It has improved because there's a crisis in the world that has pushed world market price of crude oil to 230. So if we're producing oil, but we are a net importer, so we'll pay the price. So the first question, the first point is that we haven't been serious about changing the structure of our economy. I think the second thing we have done very badly is that we have not developed our manufacturing sector. Our manufacturing sector, I mean, if I take the big companies, I asked the question yesterday, the last 10 years, which major factory have we established in this country? Very few. The Unilever, the Nestle's, they were all established in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Today, people come here, and if you look at the source of foreign revenue, the oil money is simple. I mean, everybody knows once you get there, you make money. But if we should think deep, oil is a sunset industry. Very soon, all these fossil fuel products, where would they be? The Europeans, the Americans, they are saying by 2030, they're not going to produce. Yeah. So if you are putting your faith in an industry which is, disappearing, and we are so happy doing that, and we are happy because we have improved our trade balance because oil price has gone up. Tomorrow, if oil price crashes to $40, where will we be?
Doc, I mean, sorry to cut you in. The bit about the admission as well. How has quickly politics played into this? I mean, in economics class, they'll talk about political economy.
Yeah.
How has that played into this, that you want to admit that there's a challenge, but what would the people at the other side make of that and question your ability in managing the economy?
No, but you see, I say often that managing a company and managing a country are not different.
Really?
Only the scale is different and the complexity is different, but the principles are the same. It doesn't matter what the other party says. If your circumstances have changed and you are facing headwinds, you must admit that I am in a difficult situation. If we're a pilot hanging in the air, you have a problem. Will you not call the tower to say, I have a problem? You are the world's best pilot. But if you get into trouble and your engines are shutting down, you will call for help, won't you? So for me, it doesn't really matter if your other side will maybe even laugh at you.
Ridicule you. You promised all sort of things. You have failed to deliver. Even your tenure comes to an end.
But that's what will make the difference between you and them. Your ability to say yes. Because you see, leadership must also go with humility. You're being humble enough to say, it's not gone as well as I thought it should be. And therefore, I have to change course and do things differently. It's a mark of a good leader. So I think that politics, yes, and our politics has done more damage to this country than anything else. I mean, we all witnessed what happened with e-levy and all the things that can literally putting our democracy at risk. And that's politics for you in Ghana. So even our politicians must understand that in all their thinking, in all the things they do, they must put Ghana first. Above everything else. Above your personal ego, above your own personal likes and dislikes, where you are. Those things shouldn't matter. What should matter to you is whether the decision you are taking will make Ghana a better place for all of us. So whether you are being ridiculed or not, doesn't really matter. If you fail to do what you are doing, and that will make Ghana a worse place to be. I mean, every company I know of today is complaining. That's not what we want.
But isn't it part of what is happening around us the world? I mean, every economy, we've seen inflation hits record levels. That is the argument being made everywhere.
I understand. I heard this morning in Europe, they've recorded 8.1% inflation, highest ever for the past 40 whatever years. It is true. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has added to the problems
post-COVID-19 or
post-COVID-19, even before COVID, because we all know the statistics, how much wheat Russia produced, Russia and Ukraine together, the crude oil, and of course the fact that it introduces nervous sense of uncertainty, the price shuts up. So you have no control over that. But that is the reason why we then begin to ask the question, we have to have a debate. Whether we like it or not, this is where we are. Mm-hmm. What must we do? Because that is the debate being held, in Europe, in Asia, in America. Why don't we have the same debate here?
Do you think that this government or those who are managing the economic space have agreed that this is the challenge and we have to change course?
I'm not sure, because I'm not in government and I don't know what they think. But one thing I know is that they are determined not to go to the fund. I don't know what the reasons are. Mm. Of course, if we talk about Sri Lanka and Ghana were virtually the same situation, and Sri Lanka put their foot forward and said, we'll go to the fund. I understand. We are a sovereign country. Even sovereignty has got its own boundaries. And if you look at the history, the economies of this country, the periods where we have stability and growth, and it's period where we have been under IMF rule, and let everybody prove me wrong. That is the fact. The government has done well because up to the crisis, GDP growth was averaging 5.7%. Excellent. But then it crashed to 0.4%. And then now we are struggling because new elements have been introduced into the equation. If you go back 3 years, the issue of Ghana's debt had already been raised by the fund, by the bank, by many
even Bank of Ghana too.
Yes. So this is not something that Ukraine and Russia have anything to do with.
Now, I'll be coming back to you to get more suggestions on this and whether the IMF is the way to go now rather than a delayed injection or a delayed medication that we need right now. This is PM Express Business Edition as we talk about Ghana's economic challenges. What is the best way out? You're talking to an economist, a financial person, a corporate governance strategist, and somebody who has been on those several boards of companies and raised some companies to where they belong to there as a strong multinational. This is PM Express with Dr. Ishmael Yamson. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the economy and what is the best way out. We are engaging an economist, a strategist, a finance strategist, a corporate governance expert, and somebody who's raised a lot of companies, built them, and still continue to inspire and challenge a lot of business executives out there Dr. Ishmael Yamson. And Doc, we're talking about the fund program and whether it's a medication that we should take right now. For you, do you think that current developments, there is no excuse for us to buy into or tap into a fund program that will bring about the policy credibility for the economy?
Well, you have to go to the point where the crisis actually kicked in.
Yeah.
What happened? It started with rating agencies lowering our rates. And then we went to the market to borrow money. And the investors had lost confidence, and therefore we couldn't access money from the Eurobond market. That's where the crisis started. And then suddenly, money started flowing out of Ghana. Inflation began to rise. And the currency got a big hit. So you then have to ask yourself. And then, of course, in February, we had the Ukraine-Russia war. So you then have to ask yourself, in the short term, how do we stabilize the ship?
Yeah.
This is a huge ship. Then you can then think about medium term and the long term. Investors lost confidence because they are doubtful that you can service your debt.
Yeah.
So the short term will be fund money quickly, something that will recreate, rebuild the confidence. My experience in this country is that the best option would have been to go to the fund.
Yeah.
Because the fund will restore investor confidence immediately. Will also give you access to money. The two things that you need critically are with the fund right now. And everybody, I don't think that I'm saying this because I don't respect the position of government. I respect it. But if you ask me, I will do exactly what I'm saying, that in the short term, I'll take a fund program. Because our history says that. There's no reason why, because of a fund program, that says we're a bad manager of the economy.
Don't you think that is the biggest challenge for government right now?
Politically
suicidal from what they said of those who have previously managed the economy.
I am not sure whether...
Signing for a fund program exposes that you are weak, you can't manage the economy.
No, but the people who you succeeded themselves ran a fund program. They themselves had a fund and run program. You came into office to say, you are exiting, you won't go back. That for me is a challenge. And I'm saying, yes, maybe at the time you make that judgment and that statement, you never thought that there would be Russia-Ukraine war. That will create a huge problem for your economy. I have seen a chart of fuel price increases. We are just number 3 in the world. 80-something% increase. The highest is 123, Libya. Right? So you are faced with a major crisis. And I think the immediate reaction will be, how do we stabilize this ship?
And this stability of the ship, a fund program would be critical in doing that.
I do so. I do think so. I think strongly that a fund program would help us do that. Of course, it does not do away with what you want to do. All that it will give you is a breathing space. And I think that, and I said this earlier, whether your opponents or whatever will ridicule you, it is the best judgment. Why would you feel bad because you have made the best bad judgment? And if it begins to yield results, who will benefit? Now, if you don't do it, and the short-term crisis gets into a medium-term crisis, and leads into a long-term crisis, would you have been a better manager?
But Doc, doesn't it expose then our capabilities of the Ghanaian can do it, that always when we have a challenge, then there has to be an external partner coming into our day? Because some would say that I mean, quote, how much money would the fund give us that we can raise that internally?
I understand.
It's just maximum about $1 billion, $2
George,
billion, $3 billion spread over 4 years,
yes,
with so much restrictions,
yes,
that you can raise
well,
the money
I'm not
locally.
sure whether the restrictions are restrictions. The restrictions for me are things that you should be doing that you fail to do. That's what they will insist on you doing. But I'm saying that yes, what you are saying is absolutely right. But the point is that I don't think the fund ever told Ghana to borrow beyond its capacity to service, right? We did that. We chose that option. We chose that route. And we piled up all these debt to a point where our investors, not the fund, felt that maybe we have a problem here. These guys, they are not able even to raise domestic revenue. They might not be able to. But you know, let me say this. It would have been okay if at the time you were piling up debt, your productivity was growing and you were creating more value to service the debt and pay the debt when it falls due. But we weren't doing that. So for me, what I'm saying is that yes, the fund will come, they call conditionalities. I don't call them conditionalities. These are common sense things that you should do it yourself. And if you don't do it and they come, they say, do it. Because this is what you should have been doing anyway. So I don't see them as conditions. And people say, oh, they will start going to the street, blah, 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 blah. But let me ask you a question. If you are employing 20,000 people, when all you need is 5,000 people, are you doing anybody a favor? Because you don't have the money to pay the 20,000 people. But you have employed them. Then when the time comes for you to pay, then there's a problem. All right? And these are the things that if you are an investor, you are standing by the side, lending money, you say, hang on, all these social programs that have been piled up, all this recurrent expenditure that doesn't shrink but grows. But that must go in tandem with a robust growth, productivity, and your economy to absorb the debt and its interest rate. But if you are not doing that, then you sit back and say, why should I lend them more money? Because maybe they may not even be able to pay the interest when it falls due.
But Doug, 5.3 in the middle of COVID, I mean, some will raise questions about the drivers of the growth and where it's coming from and whether it's a job-led growth or not. But a 5.3 for an economy, some will say it is not bad in the midst of COVID.
It was excellent, except that for 5.3, from which base?
Services.
Yeah, but a small low base because of the economic collapse during the COVID period. So you came out of 2020, 2021, and from 5.7 in 3 quarters. Excellent. But you are coming from a very low base. 5.4, then the issue becomes sustainability. How do you sustain the 5.4 into the medium term? And what I'm saying is that we have a hitch here. We really have. I mean, every day the city is depreciated right now. In spite of all that the central bank has actively done, the city is still depreciating.
How do we get around it? I mean, some are saying that, again, you talked about manufacturing. Those are medium to long term. But immediately, every economic manager would want to push in a little bit dollars to stabilize it, try and force dollarization. No, but how do we deal with the city challenge right now?
I agree.
Inflation is skyrocketing.
Yeah, you know, the reserves we bought, we created. What was the source of the reserves?
Exports.
Huh?
I'm asking whether the
export there is always largely borrowed money. We borrowed the money and put in the central bank and called it reserves. So if you look at our exports profile over the last 10, 15 years, we haven't done. I just quoted for you the volume And when people talk about increases, don't just talk about the nominal figures which are driven by value. Also talk about the volume. We are today 888,000 from 1 million. So we are not growing our exports. And that's a key export product in this country. Key. So I'm saying, and I'm let me say, I give all the respect to government. It is they are the managers. But I'm saying that where we are today, in the short term, to really hold this and stabilize this shape, it may be good for us, to talk to the fund. Because fund will give you not only money, but confidence from the investor community. Those are the two things that we lost. That's why we are here today.
On the concerns about the investors, and I remember I read the EIU report where they raised concerns about the hung parliament, and there are concerns of how that would also fuel investor fears, because really every fiscal measure, every revenue measure, look at the e-levy.
Yes.
Hasn't those other things contributed to the lack of investor confidence in the economy?
They have. But you see, again, we have been priding ourselves. We've never tested our democracy.
Are we testing it now?
Yes. Every time the majority in parliament has such a huge majority that it discounts the minority. You go back, 1992. When it came to the year that we have a hung parliament, we don't know how to manage it. And yet democracy requires diplomacy. It requires talking to each other, respecting each other's views, making sure that there's more backdoor negotiations even before you get into parliament. But when everybody says, I am right, you are wrong, in a parliament where you are hung, it's not going to work.
The economy is suffering.
So then the economy will suffer, because the conclusion is that these guys don't know how to manage democracy. And democracy is not about I have power and you don't have power. It's about building consensus. It's about building understanding between the people who represent us. Because none of them went there not to serve the interests of Ghana. No parliamentarian went there to serve his own interests. At least that's what they will tell you. So if you went there to serve the interests of Ghana, then the first question you ask yourself, would this be in the interest of Ghana if we do this or if we don't do it? So we now have tested it, and they have realized that we have a problem here. Democracy is good only if you have a big majority. Then you can do what you like. But when there should be debate, when there should be critical discussion, we don't know how to handle it. It's all the fight in parliament.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that we need to understand that the times have changed. The whole world, nobody will be in the same situation as we were 5 years before. And we need to recognize that we are living in a totally new world. Today, by the time you leave here, if you go and put on air, everybody will know what we said in this room. 10 years ago, it wasn't like that. So you live in a world which has so dramatically changed. Our own behavior must begin to mimic the changed world. We need to know that we can't live as if we were 1992, where a big majority, and if I say I'm bringing this bill and you don't like it, all you can do is to walk
majority
out.
will have its way.
Majority have its way.
And the minority
now we know
say
majority, exactly,
cannot have their way.
No.
Let me come back again to the Ghana cedi and the immediate measures. Do you think that the Bank of Ghana has gotten its approach right? Or some would say that they've done what they can do on the monetary side. The fiscal is not helping. How do we get around the challenge with the cedi?
Yeah, it is true that fiscal hasn't helped. But I also think that the Bank of Ghana has done well. I mean, that is what any central bank will do. They say when you have inflation pressure, raise interest rate. You learned in economics. So that is classic. But for me, what surprises me is that we don't seem to understand what is driving our inflation.
Supply driven, but there's a little bit of demand driven as well.
In April, our producer price cost rose by 32%. That will drive your consumer price, right?
Yeah.
So what is it that is driving the producer price? 32%. 32%. Both, a lot of commodities prices have gone up 500%, 600%. Okay? To the freight charges from Europe, from Asia, even if we're importing commodity, finished products, has more than quadrupled. Those are the things that are feeding into your inflation. So raising your interest rate really is not what is driving your inflation, because your inflation is being driven partly, but more largely, but imported inflation. Today, you go to ShopRite and buy bread. I used to buy bread, I go to every Sunday, brown bread, 4 cedis something. Now it's close to 9 cedis, because you don't produce wheat, but you eat bread. So if you say, I must increase interest rate, no, I must increase interest rate to solve that problem, will you really solve that problem?
But isn't there a demand bit, the excess liquidity,
Well,
that is also fueling
Who has the excess liquidity?
to buy those dollars and all? There's an element of
I understand.
demand
Yeah.
that a policy rate hike should check.
Should, exactly. The policy rate hike should check demand. Normally we talk about economy which is heated.
Yeah.
In Europe, demand is heating up post-COVID. There's so much people pent up demand in Europe, America, and all those places, right? People who didn't have much to do with their money, now they go out and they want to buy. So that is driving inflation, plus your food prices and all. So in Ghana, who is spending the money? Is it me and you and me, or who? The biggest spender in this economy is government. That's the biggest spender. Now government is pushing the entire private sector out of the credit market. Today, I mean, if government is paying 25%, why would I go and put my money in some equities on the Ghana Stock Exchange and suffer all the pressures and the stress, when if I go and sleep and I put my money in some government equity, government bond, I'll get 25% neat? Why? So I am not sure. Yes, it is true. That's why we all studied. When inflation go up, we raise interest rate. I'm not too sure whether that is really the right thing that we should be doing. Because whether we like it or not, the producer price inflation will drive our consumer price inflation in this country. Who in this country has talked about all the supply chain disruptions? Who? How are we managing that? Who is talking about it? Nobody. So if we believe that we raise interest to make it worse for the manufacturer, the man or the woman or the company is trying to put things together and produce in Ghana, now instead of borrowing from a bank for say 12-15%, he has to go. So yeah, he's taking that action. But we also always have to remember that fiscal consolidation always have the other side against growth. That growth will suffer. Growth will suffer in these drastic fiscal consolidation measures. So we need to ask ourselves, when growth begins to suffer, maybe you would have tapered inflation. What else are you going to do?
This is PM Express Business Edition. We engage in economist and corporate governance strategist, Dr. Ishmael Yamson, sharing his thought about how do we manage things now in the economy and what are the threats ahead of us. Also, beginning his thought, he served on several presidential councils. Are these presidents or leaders listening to wise counsel or not? This is PM Express Business Edition. Right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the economy and current challenges and what is the way out or the best way out? You're talking to an economist, a strategist, a corporate governance person, and someone that has built a lot of institutions and continue to even advise institutions to turn things around at the age of 80. And Doc, we're talking about inflation and debt issues and all those things. But let me get your quick thought on the rising debt. What should be, again, the best way out? Should we stop borrowing? Then what happens to government in finance and ongoing development? Or what should we do?
I think that continuing to borrow will be a disaster, because it's the borrowing that has led us into debt that has evaporated investor confidence. Now, why would you want to continue to do that? And that's why I'm saying, for in the short term, and don't get me wrong, it is all wrong to borrow. In fact, it is good to run your business or your country with somebody else's money. But only on condition that you can service that debt. Now, if we have got to a stage where investors are not too sure about our ability to service that debt, my judgment will be place a halt on it. And that's what leads me to the fund program. I know that I may be the odd one talking about this, but I come to that because you need investors. You need investor money. And not only portfolio investors, you also need foreign direct investors. The foreign direct investors don't like uncertainties. They hate uncertainties.
But Doc, if you freeze these borrowings, how do you then refinance those debts that are maturing?
But I can tell you that if we take a fund program, we will be able to finance, because the fund program will come with money, right?
$1 billion, 2 billion.
Well, I can't guess, but our debt is that
spread over 4 years.
We should ask for big money, not the small monies.
10 billion?
Oh yeah, of course, we're going past that. We have to, because we are an important African economy. Don't forget. So I'm sure the fund will be amenable to a good discussion with Ghana, and we have got some very competent people in the Ministry of Finance who will do this. I'm very sure. So I think that we should not feel too shy away from the fund. You don't commit a crime going to the fund. And if the other people would ridicule you, oh, he said you won't go, so what? The moment you begin to show results, good results, then whether they ridicule you, who will look a better person? But if, as I said earlier, you may say, I don't know who would lend us money, because sometime earlier I had heard of some 2 billion that they were going to borrow.
Syndicated loan.
Syndicated loan. I don't know where we are today. But you get it worse and worse every day. And every investor I have got to, they say, look, you people, go to the fund and all these uncertainties will disappear. And I think that is why in the short term we need it. I may belong to the old school.
Yeah, old school economic, classical economics.
But I know that I've studied the history of this country. The only period we are good and stable and growing, so we have a fund program. It doesn't mean that we have to be there all the time. The question we have to ask ourselves, why is it that every time we go off a fund program,
things get worse?
We go back to where we were. That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Because we pretend to be managing the ex-president Kufuor said, they pretend to be working, you pretend to be paying them.
What about revenue? Because some have put the suggestion across that our problem is revenue. If you raise the required revenue, our problems will be over.
But I thought last year we did very well.
Yeah.
And yet we are where we are today.
Our needs are still rising.
Exactly.
The fact that we raise more, we don't cap our expenditure.
Precisely. That's the question. And that's why I come back, I ask the question, what are we doing wrong? Listen, we are 60-something years after independence. You go and check all the data. And look at how we are going like this. Go like this, GDP goes like this, come down, goes like. We never have a sustained growth. But you accumulate value when you are growing sustainably. Okay? Every 4 years, we change government, every 8 years. But 8 years in the life of a government is very long to do something very good. How many years did Nkrumah rule this country? 9 years. Look at what he did in those 9 years. I'm not saying that the circumstances then are the same as today.
Now, yeah.
But I'm saying, why was he able to do all that? And we struggle. And then somebody will say, oh, but he had one party state. That's fine. If one party state, then Rawlings, who ran this country, one party for 90 years, should have created a heaven out of Ghana. It's not. It's not.
So it's expenditure. If we're able to
Yes.
cap our expenditure,
Look, because
that is the critical
our
challenge.
politicians are very good at creating recurrent expenditures. Because that's what the people want to hear, right? And then you create it, and they say, I'm going to give employment to the youth. That's fine. But you also have to ask a question. How am I going to pay them? And what value would they deliver to the economy? It's not just even paying them, but they should deliver value higher than the pay they are getting. But if it's just like give people jobs, which takes away, then it doesn't matter how much revenue you collect. I'm sure even if we double our revenue today, we'll still be where we are. But we'll find ways and means to spend the money.
Doc, I mean, you have served on several presidential, and not to mention any names, and some will say that with all these things, why did Doc fail to tell the presidents or ministers over the period? What is the problem? Maybe some will say that getting into the political chair is the challenge.
I think
What has been the challenge in terms of advancing all these solutions, the structure of our economy, inflation, CD has been a perennial thing.
Yes.
Are these leaders, and not to mention anybody's name, are they just not listening? Or they tell them, listen, Asamna Wakana is good, but we won't take it because political expediency and capturing power is the most critical thing, and not those long economic notes of it.
But you have answered it. We've done more politics with this country than we have managed.
And that's why it's failed for those advice of yours to be implemented?
Yes. You know, we've done more politics with this country than we've managed it properly. You know, what do we hear? Very soon we'll be getting into election season. We'll build your road, we'll give you water, we'll build you a school, we'll do this, we'll change that. Literally, we'll give you the world. You don't have to do anything. When I was going to school, I paid fees until Nkrumah introduced a fee-free education, I think 58 or thereabouts. And then we realized that free education actually meant no education, because then we couldn't get textbooks and they drowned out, just as we have today. So we go and promise the moon, forgetting that the promise must come with cash to support, to deliver the promise. You know, I'm not critical of anything they have done, but what I'm saying is that, did they ask themselves, all the politicians, all the government we have had, where is the money going to come from to do all the things that you want to do, right? Look at the motorway. How old is the motorway? 60 years. And it is the same motorway we are using today. Now go and see the cracks. Why haven't we, and our port, Tema Port, serves Burkina Faso, all these countries.
So Doc, I get from you that the challenge is that advising these leaders and across the challenge is that politics erodes all those good economic advice.
Absolutely. I think that is that, you know, and the thing is that politicians think more about
capturing
the next election. I've had the opportunity of talking to a newly elected government when I was told in the face, Mr. Yamson, you are talking 30 years. We are talking next 4 years. I said, yes. you are taking the next 4 years. That's true. But if you don't manage next 4 years properly, you won't be there 30 years to come. Right?
Yeah.
So my advice is very simple. Let's put Ghana first in everything that we want to do. Because why do you go and promise something that you know you don't even know how you are going to fund? You don't.
That's interesting. But Doc, I want to also, I mean, you've been in the corporate world. We know where you've come from and still contributing your quota. For those young chief executives that are coming up, what advice do you have for them? And when it also comes to corporate governance for both private and public. Let's first start with the advice for those budding chief executives, heads of institutions that are coming up.
First of all, the first thing I want to tell this young budding executive is that they must be ethical and they must have conscience in everything they do. Most of them want the world tomorrow. But my sister, my auntie used to tell me, Obra, Wobo, you don't get to be there.
You live it.
You just have to live and create and get there. So and they must have conscience in everything they do. But secondly, they must have humility. Humility to accept that you don't know everything. Humility to accept when you are wrong. Humility to accept that there are people who may probably know better than you do. The humility to accept that the people down there, they probably have better ideas than you have. How do you reach out to them? I've been to places, we've done programs for top executives, and we have deliberately brought younger people, second, third below them. They have come to tell them they can triple, quadruple their businesses, and they are sitting up there. And they were shocked. They are there, these young people, and they had never engaged them. So for those young executives, don't get swollen-headed when you are promoted chief executive and you have a car and this and blah, 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 blah. It's temporary. One day, they will write to you a fine letter. On June, you will be retired. Then you have to remember, what am I leaving behind? What legacy? And I will extend this to our leaders. What legacy do you leave behind? Should be more important to you, whether you are a chief executive or you are president or you are a minister, whatever. What legacy? How will you be remembered when you have left this job?
Let's come to corporate governance.
Yes.
How do we get around it? It's a big challenge.
It's a big
Private
challenge.
sector, public sector.
Public sector.
How do we get around it, Doctor?
Because people want to cut corners in this country. And when you get corners, you cut corners and you prosper, people hail you until the veil is removed. Then suddenly people realize, what we were seeing was actually not real. Corporate governance should be at the center. Let me put it, good corporate governance must be at the center of every institution in this country. How? You go to some public institutions, the CEO is fighting with the chairman. Why? Because they are both fighting over contracts. Something that should never, ever happen. And I'm not saying only public sector, even the private sector. So we have got to a situation where we seem to have institutionalized the culture of bad corporate governance in this country. And therefore, who suffers? The employees, the citizens, they are the ones who suffer. But you are happy. Probably you've made tons of money. You've accumulated lots of assets. You are happy with your family. But the people behind, how do they think about you? They may have no respect for you.
Doc, I appreciate your time so much, and time is not our best friend, but I know that the debate will still go on in the various homes and offices about how can we better manage the situation. And one critical thing about the corporate governance as well and the economy, I know the debate will go on. This has been PM Express Business Edition. As you spoke about the economy and the best way out. Let the debate go on in your homes. Let the debate go on in your offices. At the end of the day, it's about how to get things right for all of us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.